If you look up Ottawa's worst neighborhoods online, you're going to see a lot of videos basically throwing entire neighborhoods under the bus. And usually when people talk negatively about an area, they're not really talking about the entire neighborhood. They're talking about a very specific area. Maybe there is a stretch with shelters, visible homelessness, open drug use, things like that. I went ahead and I pulled the Ottawa Police Report incident data from January 1st, 2026 up until May 14th. And I'm going to go through the top 10 neighborhoods with the highest reported incidents, but also explain what's actually driving those numbers. My name's Rebecca. I'm a real estate agent here in Ottawa. And if you and your family are considering making a move here to Ottawa and making it your home, and you're not really sure where exactly you should live, I've not only helped many families make the move over here, but I've also done a few relocation moves myself. And I know just how hard it can be. And if you are in need of some guidance and you're about to move here to Ottawa, send me an email with all of your questions. My contact info will be down below. Now, most of these incidents are actually crimes against a property and not necessarily a violent crime. So think theft, car break-ins, retail theft, property damages, disturbances, things like that. They're not just random violent attacks happening constantly everywhere. So taking the number one spot is none other than Sandy Hill. Sandy Hill reported 1,349 incidents. Now, immediately, if you're moving to Ottawa and hear that number, you're probably thinking, what the heck is happening there? But once you actually look at the map, the incidents are really just heavily concentrated closer to Rideau, Nelson, Besser area near the University of Ottawa, and along the Rideau Street edge. So what we really have here in this particular pocket is student housing, high-rise rentals, heavy foot traffic. There's a lot of late night activity, some dense apartment clusters, homelessness, open drug use. There's a lot of community services in this area. And honestly, given what's so concentrated in this area, this is not exactly surprising. This is a busy urban part of the city. It's not really a quiet suburban neighborhood. And for anyone who's spent time in bigger cities like Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal, this is really nowhere near the level of something like East Hastings in Vancouver, for example. If you have ever driven through there, you probably know exactly what I mean. It's pretty sad to see. It's pretty hard to see. But there's something really important to keep in mind here. A huge percentage of the incidents reported in Sandy Hill are mostly property related incidents. They're not necessarily violent crimes against some random residents. And honestly, depending on what stage of life you're in and what particular part of Sandy Hill you're in, you may actually love living here. Some people really love being so close to downtown and the university, transit. It's a really great neighborhood, incidents set aside. Number two is Centretown with 1,268 reported incidents. Now, if you spent enough time in downtown Ottawa, it probably really doesn't shock you. A lot of the issues are mostly around parts of Bank Street, especially closer to some of the shelter and community support areas like the Center 507. It's also going to be around areas like Bank and Gilmore, Bank and Cooper, Bank and Lisgar. Residents and businesses have actually been very vocal over the last few years about needles, intoxication, public drug use, aggressive behavior even, and people not always feeling comfortable walking alone at night. However, this does not mean all of Centretown is going to feel unsafe. There are plenty of people who absolutely love living in Centretown because if you work downtown or really just enjoy being close to everything, being able to walk to restaurants, coffee shops, events, the canal, all without needing a car constantly. It's really why a lot of people love living there. And it's a little bit more affordable too. You can find some really great condos along Somerset, for example, for an affordable price, really. This is why I think calling an entire neighborhood bad, honestly, it really just oversimplifies things way too much. Number three is Overbrook or the McArthur area with 582 incidents. This area has had a rougher reputation locally for a long time, especially around the McArthur corridor. If you ask longtime Ottawa locals about this area, most of them will immediately have something to say about it. But for the people relocating here, it's usually not so obvious at first why the neighborhood gets talked about the way that it does. A lot of it comes down to the McArthur area itself, plus some of the pockets around St. Paul's Park and parts near Donald and MacArthur. There's been some gang activity and shootings over the years, along with, older apartment clusters. There's a little bit of lower income housing pockets. However, most of these incidents, 454 actually, are crime against property and not necessarily against people. There's some sections that honestly just feel a little bit more rough and a little bit more, run down compared to some of Ottawa's newer suburbs, of course. It really isn't all that bad, though. There are actually quite a few students and younger professionals who specifically choose Overbrook because the budget stretches much further there, while still being, you're pretty close to downtown and the University of Ottawa. The housing is cheaper and you can still get downtown pretty easily without paying, Glebe or Centretown prices. Number 4 is Lowertown with 430 incidents. A lot of the concentration here is closer to the Rideau and King Edward corridor. So again, shelters, there's a lot of heavy foot traffic, transit, there's a little bit of, spillover from ByWard Market, for example. It's kind of all concentrated together. Number 5 is ByWard Market with 407 incidents. Honestly, if you live in Ottawa, this isn't going to surprise anybody. There's a lot of bars here. There's a lot of nightlife. There's a lot of tourists. And alongside of that, you're going to get some intoxication and heavy police presence. It's all kind of packed into a very small area. Number 7 is Carson Grove Meadows with 373 reported incidents. Now, honestly, if you know Ottawa and you just saw this numbers, this would confuse a lot of people that live here and thinking, why is this even here? So because Carson Grove and Carson Meadows is not generally considered one of Ottawa's rough neighborhoods socially, you don't really hear people warning others not to move here the way that you would with places like Vanier or even Bayshore. A lot of the incidents in this neighborhood are happening more closely towards the, the busier commercial sections, not so much the quieter residential pockets deeper into the neighborhood, with the exception of Jasmine Crescent. That was pretty bad a couple of years ago. It had a lot of residents feeling uneasy with some recent homicides. But what's interesting is that Carson Grove itself doesn't really have this horrible reputation locally. Most people would normally describe a lot of it as, a fairly normal suburban neighborhood with homes, parks, schools, and families who've lived there for years. Honestly, I think a lot of residents here would be probably surprised seeing it rank this high. Number 8 is Glebe-Dows Lake area with 347 incidents. If you were to see this area for the first time, you'd probably say, how is this neighborhood even on this list? It is actually one of the most sought out neighborhoods in Ottawa, but also one of the most expensive neighborhoods. There's a lot of boutique shops. It really is a true 15-minute neighborhood, but with that, it becomes a target for things like theft and break-ins. To be very honest with you, a lot of these incidents are probably heavily influenced by Lansdowne being right there, Bank Street, major events, retails, crowds, restaurants, and the parked cars. It's really not what most people picture when they hear high crime neighborhood. It's kind of surprising. Number 9 is South Keys-Greenboro West area with 340 incidents. I think this one has developed a much worse reputation locally over the last couple of years compared to what it used to be. Part of that is definitely because of how close it is to areas like the Huron Gate, which has had a rough reputation in Ottawa for a really long time, especially around, poverty, crime, social issues, a little bit of gang activity too. At the same time, though, I don't think most people would really describe the surrounding, the residential streets themselves as some horrible, dangerous place to live. A lot of families still live there because, it's practical, it's relatively convenient, you're close to transit, shopping, and generally just, a little bit more affordable than some of the other parts of the city. And number 10 is Cityview-Crestview-Meadowlands with 318 incidents. And again, a lot of these incidents are really happening mostly around the Maribel commercial strip and some of the shopping areas rather than residential side streets. Now, I already know if you live in Ottawa, you're probably already wondering, okay, why is Vanier not on this list? Technically, the Ottawa Police separates Vanier North and Vanier South in the data, but most locals just think of the area broadly as just, Vanier as a whole. If you combine the two together, Vanier would absolutely be on this list, probably somewhere between 4 and 5. Same thing with Centretown. West Centretown is separated from Centretown in the data. And even though most people moving to Ottawa would probably just think all of it as, maybe it's just downtown. This is exactly why I don't think it makes sense to label one entire neighborhood as the worst. Because where exactly? Which side? Which street? Which pockets? What's been going on in the area? The entire neighborhood isn't all going to be the same. And depending on what your budget is or, your comfort level, the stage of life that you're in, and what you personally prioritize, two people can have completely different opinions on the exact same neighborhood.